Hi there. In this video, I'd like to showcase the game engine I've been working on. It is called Esdief, which is a play on the acronym SDF, which is short for Signed Distance Field or Signed Distance Function. And I won't get too technical, but what that basically means is that here I have a sphere in the scene, but rather than other 3D game engines or renderers or modelers like Blender and Unity, this is not made up of vertices. This is a ray-marched signed distance field, which means that there's no topology. So I can do something like this, right? Take one sphere, I put it next to another sphere, and I can smoothly blend between the two. And I can tell it to blend in an additive fashion or subtractive. Or intersection, which shows only where the two shapes overlap. Or I can do color blending, where if I give one shape a color, it'll only apply it to the other color where it overlaps with, as much smoothing as I want. And per shape, I can have, several options. I can change what kind of shape it is, from a cube to a torus to a cylinder. A few others. I can also do a combination of shapes. So I can have it, here's halfway between a sphere and a cylinder. Now back to full sphere. I can have it transition from a sphere to a torus, throw a bit of a cone in there. So you can create any combination you want. Let's just go back to a sphere. There's actually also splines. So I can have, I can update the points, and all these shapes can blend with other shapes. You may notice some flickering going on, and that's because for performance reasons, I have to discretize the scene into voxels. But we can increase the resolution of this to try to prevent any of that, and I can make my spline, sample more to become really smooth. And we should hopefully see a lot less of that jittering going on. So outside of the individual shape types, you can also affect the roundness of a shape. Here's a cube as it gets rounder and rounder. You also have some deformation settings. So I can take this cube and I can apply some sort of warping to it. It's just basically applying sine waves or other trig functions to it. I can also do something like adding fractal Brownian noise. Definitely pronounced that wrong. FBM, which is sort of this procedural terrain effect. Can also do something like affect the domain, which means I can do something like adding symmetry. So if I just, if I just increase the bounding box a bit, we can see that I will have duplicate shapes, and no matter how I affect one, I'm just going to disable the deformation, it will affect all of them, because they're just duplicates of one another. I can also have it be symmetry on a polar type. So circular symmetry around an origin point. Or a repeated limited, or limited repeated one in a grid. Anything I do to one, it'll do another. So if I spawn in a second one here, and I blend it. Sorry, just try to get a better look. Let me just increase the padding a bit more. Oops. Sort of hard to tell, but we have a bunch of spheres blending with the other ones. But let's remove one of these for now, and then disable that. So outside of individual shapes, we have some mosaic settings. And so a mosaic is just a collection of shapes. So here I have my shapes mosaic. And so I can have multiple shapes within the mosaic. And I can also have multiple mosaics. So if I just duplicate this, put it up here, so not only will these blend together, so if I just make that unique, so if I have one blend into the other, and I'll have this one blend into this one, I can take this thing here, and this mosaic rather, and I could tell this to also blend, and it'll blend between the two. But I can also have this one subtract from one to the other. And with all these different settings and effects, I like to think you could create some pretty neat things. So just as an example, here's a little Kirby I've modeled. So these are just made up of spheres, or actually I think it's just spheres, maybe some cylinders, to create this Kirby. And so there's some smooth blending going on here, like these arms that are also symmetry on the x-axis. Same for the feet, and they're very slightly blended. All the eyes and face and the cheeks, that is a color blending. So you see that it's actually, it's flat to it, and that's because if I just take a look at this mouth as an example, and I disable the color blending, it really looks like this. But if I put it back, and then enable color blending, we have a mouth. So outside of mosaic settings, we also have some scene settings, like changing the camera, so I can make it orthographic, and change the camera size, perspective. I can change the lighting of the scene, so I can change the ambient light, or how much ambient there is, and therefore now anything not lit by the light source, which is a directional light, will be dark. I can affect the directional light, both the color of it and the strength of it, as well as whether it's a point light or a direction light. But let's put these back for now. So because I want this to be more than just a modeling system, I want to actually make games in it, I've added the ability to do animations and scripting. So if I take a look at this scene now, this is a little piranha plant that I've modeled. And if I take a look at the animation, we'll see that there's some keyframes here and an audio track. So if I hit play up here, we'll see that it animates. And you can keyframe almost any attribute. So right now you'll see that this is keyframing the position, where it just sort of tells the neck how to move up and down. And it just plays this audio track. I also have a script. So if I just pause it, I take a look at my scripts, we'll see that on start, I tell it to play the animation. And then on every update frame, I tell it to rotate the first mosaic, which is the head, or rather the neck. We can see here if I take a look at some of the things in the scene. So just as an example, if I take a look at this head, I can, now it's a cube. And I like to think there's some cool, things you can play around with and create some funny looking scenes. Just as an example, or another example, if I go to this scene here, notice that there is nothing, not even any mosaic. That's because there's a script on the scene itself. If I take a look at that script, we can see that on start, it tells it to spawn in a bunch of shapes. And on update, it tells it to make one shape, follow the next shape. And if you don't recognize this language, it's because I sort of wrote it myself. It's just a system that parses these lines. It converts it to a command manager that I wrote. So if I hit play, see that it spawns this one shape here. And if I go to select it and move it around, we'll see that all the shapes behind it follow it. And for the last of some of the demo scenes that I've made, there's this one, which showcases some very, very primitive physics, as well as input. So if I take a look at this, sorry, just make a change there, and I hit play, you'll see that every time this ball hits the paddle, it bounces, and that's just some very simple collision detection. And I can also do some input. So if this is me using the keyboard to move my paddle around, and you see that depending on where the ball hits it, it bounces. And it'll bounce off. If I take a look at the code just as an example, you can see here's my update logic for the paddle, which tells it how to move based on my keyboard input, and the ball controller, which just says, hey, when you collide with something, invert your velocity and play the confirmation sound. So that's just pretty few examples of some things that I think are pretty neat about it. If I can show just a few more things, I also have mesh importing. So if I take a look here, I go to my asset browser to this FBX file. Here's a little 3D, it was a 3D model, FBX, so it was comprised of triangles and vertices, but when I load it up here, it's now a signed distance function, or at least a voxel representation of one. And I can apply a material to it. And you notice that it's not, perfect, but there's some limitations. But because it's now a signed distance function, if I create a new mosaic and I apply a blending mode to this, I can do something like this. I can tell it to use the color of the shape under it. So you can do some, fun things with this. Another of the things that I think is pretty cool is the inverse kinematic system. So if I take one shape here and I will duplicate it here, and I'll create one more, put it down here, and I'll just parent these. So I have this parent one, and then this middle one controls that one. And if I go to this one, the leaf node, if you will, and I enable inverse kinematics, and I tell it that there's two parents above it, and I hit play, you'll see that as I move one, the other ones sort of move in a joint fashion. This also applies to splines. So if I here and I just make this a spline, and I will enable IK here, and I hit play, and I grab this point. Now this whole spline will move like one connected set of joints. And lastly, one of the things I've been working on recently is a sort of a new UI system. So if I press my E key, I have my new radial menu, which I can do things like change the shape or change the blending mode, deformations. So just as an example, here's a new one. Go to blend, blending mode here, and then I can affect the amount. And this also applies to the mosaic if I'm selecting it. So I can change the blend mode of the mosaic. I can add a new shape to it, which we see here is created one there. I also have basic networking system, but that's not really in a place to show off quite yet. But anywho, that's my game engine. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like updates on this, you can either subscribe to the YouTube channel, or you can follow me on Twitter, where I will put a link in the description, where I put semi-regular updates or little videos of things I've added. Thanks for watching.